Welcome back to another episode of Growth Vertical. Today we're joined by Jason Kramer, founder and CEO of Cultivize, a consulting firm that specializes in lead nurturing strategies and done for you custom CRM implementation. He has over 20 years of experience in marketing and business development. So it's actually a great chance to catch up with Jason here, considering his wealth of experience. And also with the fact that he's actually worked with some top brands out there. We're talking, Virgin Atlantic Airways, Johnnie Walker, and he's launched numerous small businesses through his boutique agency before founding Cultivize in 2018. Right now, he's actually on a mission to empower businesses to align marketing and sales, something we all are always fighting to do. So today we're going to be talking about the future of CRM and lead nurturing in marketing. And I wanted to introduce you, Jason. Thank you for coming on to the Growth Vertical podcast, of course, and having a
Thank
chat
you,
with me.
Neil. Yeah, and all the way from New York and across the pond. But the power of technology brings us together today.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, do you know what? It's phenomenal that we can. I've had like multiple, of course, guests on the show, but it's actually really nice to have someone on the CRM side of things. So we're talking about like data warehousing, data management, you know, we're talking about managing customer data. And why I'm getting excited about this is because it's actually one of the tech stacks, the core tech stacks, or the fundamentals that marketers should be getting right in this day and age in order to make the most of their resources and ensuring that they're actually successful with their marketing strategies. So I'm excited to get into a bit of this. But before we get into that, did you want to quickly give us a bit of a snippet into how this came to be with Cultivize? What's your story? How did you get into marketing? That would be exciting to know.
Yeah, so I've always been a creative, kid growing up. I'm not a kid anymore, but I had gone to Syracuse University. For those in the States know it, maybe outside, maybe not, but that's okay. Went to art school there and became a graphic designer, not really knowing what graphic design was, but kind of fell in love with, computers and just being, always embraced in art. And fast track, as you mentioned, I worked for agencies in Manhattan, in New York for a little while. And then I was doing a lot of freelance work. And so that led to me throwing out the idea to myself, okay, well, maybe I could turn my freelance business into like a full-time hustle, basically. And so I ran and built a boutique agency for 16 years, mostly working with service-based businesses, doing branding, web development, all sorts of things for them. And towards the end of that, I got really heavy into email marketing for these clients. And even though I wasn't doing a lot of inbound marketing strategy, the conversation would always come up about, how are you tracking things? How are things working out? And it was always the same answer. They didn't know, right? Because they didn't have a CRM, they didn't have sales activities connected to marketing activities. And so that light bulb went off for me. And it was time for me to kind of get out of the whole world of web design and graphic design and get into something new and exciting. And so that's why I started Cultivize, to help businesses bridge the gap between
Mhm.
what they're doing on the marketing side and sales side. And as you mentioned before, a lot of that centers around their CRM, ERP, or other tools they're using to make that all possible.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of businesses actually that still lack a CRM, right? Even having something that can actually house a lot of this data that it's important to keep a record of or keep track of. So that's actually pretty exciting in terms of like the development, of course, right? Because you mentioned that you're into websites and things like that as well, which is still a thing. But even not to take this conversation to AI, but with AI pushing a lot of the boundaries on some of that stuff with around websites, building them, designing them, making sure that we develop a almost a concept and I would say our central hub of awareness, right? Our website, which actually showcases all the information we need. One of the toughest things is how we can connect the dots between our prospects and also our existing customers through data capture and through data management. And we're going back to the bit on spreadsheets. I think one other thing is I always hear is I've come across businesses even till this day as a growth marketer where I'm helping a business and they don't have a CRM. And I've mentioned you can use a spreadsheet, maybe with something like Zapier to power it, maybe build some automations around it. But what you're doing is you're essentially spending the time building that custom spreadsheet CRM, but in terms of man hours. And why not get a specific CRM like a HubSpot what have you, or even a robust email marketing tool that can house some CRM contact data, right? There's a lot of businesses out there still doing it old school, and they'll burn the resources. Some don't have anything. So what would you say is like the true purpose of our CRM if we had to dumb it down for everyone? Like, what is the core
So,
fundamental
yeah,
behind it?
it's a great question, Neil. So, I'd like to start by saying the definition of what I would define as a CRM. You mentioned, email marketing tools, spreadsheets. There's a lot of different tools out there, and especially now, there's literally tens of thousands of pieces of software you could potentially use for your business. The challenge is there's all these shiny objects, right? And it's really easy to start a free trial on something. And even you mentioned HubSpot. HubSpot is a very complex, very powerful platform. It's expensive, but the trap is, oh, I'm going to get a free trial of HubSpot. I don't have to pay anything. The free trial gives you less than 5% of what HubSpot can do. So you're really not really demoing HubSpot. You're using basically a glorified address book. And then when you want to upgrade, it's like, $1,500 a month or 3,000 a month, whatever it is or more for the features you need. And so to me, a CRM has three core components. One is a place to store all of your contacts, which I would define as your leads, strategic partners, vendors, existing customers, prior customers in a segmentable way so that you know exactly what's in there and it's not all jumbled together. Think of like an organized file cabinet with your dividers and your folders versus
Yeah.
just throwing everything into a box, right? And so if you don't have your data segmented and clean and organized, you really can't leverage and use it. The second component is email marketing. I really truly believe that a good CRM system will have email marketing connected into the CRM natively, meaning it's not a third party tool, it's built into the software. And the power of that is now you can start tracking who's coming back to the website from your newsletters, who's engaging in your content, who's looking at, the PDF of the pricing sheet you sent them and opening that versus just putting it in an attachment and not knowing. So email marketing tied in with the CRM data is extremely powerful. And then it becomes even more powerful when the CRM has a sales component. So now you have your sales team using the same system that the marketing team is using, and all that data flows together. And I'll share some stories kind of as we go through, but that would be like the three main components of what I would define as a CRM. And to your point before, without those tools, you're really spinning your wheels, right? Because even with siloed, separate software using spreadsheets, there's a lot of room for human error, for inconsistent data going in there. And then you're really also spending all those hours that you mentioned, Neil, right? Putting all this information in and really not getting much out of it, right? And so it's kind of like, putting a band aid on that solution without a permanent solution to fix it.
I think in this, if you're running, let's say, in the B2B side of things, there usually is a case of like running a third party program, right? So having referral partners work with you, sharing content through them, syndicating content through those networks. But what happens is most of the time when you do work with those businesses and come up with campaigns, you generate a bunch of leads. The leads are handed over in a CSV, and the CSV is you just have to import it, right? That in itself is a time consuming task, especially if you need to manipulate the data and get it into your CRM a certain way, which is perfectly fine. But imagine if you didn't have a CRM and you had to manage all those leads coming in, right? You're using man hours for those sort of tasks, those minute tasks, but also you're trying to use man hours and not have any automation or any signaling in place where you can tie your direct campaigns to customer data or prospect data within your CRM to be like, hey, well, we know that there's this direct feedback loop. Is this working what I'm doing today or is it not? Whereas if you were to do it offline on spreadsheets and things like that without any automations in place or signaling in place, we're talking about conversion rates dropping. We're talking about having a leaky funnel, having a leaky, I guess, a bad conversion rate overall, and you won't be able to really assess or measure where you're having the most impact and optimizing for the right thing. And you mentioned email marketing, which of course has been relayed as lead nurturing as well. So let's talk about that for a second, right? Email marketing. I want to kind of unpack that a bit more as well. Why is nurturing so important in this day and age? Why is it not so good to have the quick contact, let me get
Yeah.
some lead, and just that's it. That's business, right?
I would say, listen, and everybody listening too is going to feel the same way I feel. It'd be amazing if you spoke to somebody today and right away after 10 minutes, they're like, okay, where do I sign? Here's the money. Let's go. It doesn't happen that way, especially in the B2B world. I mean, there's usually at least a 3 month to a 12-month or longer sales cycle, depending on what you're selling and the complexity of that service or that project or that, offering. And so the nurturing is extremely important, more so than ever. And for the main reason that the person you're talking to today, depending on where they're at in their buying cycle, because we know it's shifted. Now the buyer is in full control, no longer the person selling anything. And so they might be at that early research stage. They might be narrowing it down to you and two other competitors. But the nurturing helps stay in front of them and keep them educated. And I think there's two big missteps that people have when it comes to nurturing, actually three. So the first is they do it haphazardly, right? They don't come up with a repeatable process to nurture leads. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when they remember, they reach out to somebody. Oh, I haven't spoken to Neil in a couple of months. Let me give him a call, right? Because now you have the time and you're thinking about Neil. And so with that haphazard approach, there's no consistency in staying in front of all of these leads that you're generating. Mind you, you've probably spent a lot of money generating these leads. You've done a webinar, you've gone to a trade show, you're doing networking, right? You're doing any number of things to generate that person even talking to you in the first place. And you might have spent $10 or $100 to get that lead or more. And so if you're not doing anything to nurture them, then really why are you spending the money to even generate the lead? That's the way I look at it, right? And so the nurse first has to be a process. And that process isn't just only sometimes email, which is powerful, but if it is email, it can't be selling, right? It has to be educational. It has to be short, sweet, just a couple of hundred words, in that email. No one's going to read a long, huge paragraph, but it has to be captivating. It has to have a strong hook. It has to get them to take some type of action and do something. And the action isn't necessarily scheduling a call, doing scheduling a demo. It might be just downloading something you're sending them, like an ebook, or giving them a link to an article. So, for example, with us here at Cultivize, there's a great article Harvard Business Review did a few years back that says, why do over 75% of businesses fail at implementing a CRM on their own? Now, it's a great article. It's not an article I wrote, but by me sending it and saying, listen, don't take my word for it here at Cultivize, even though I know what we're talking about, read this article from Harvard Business Review. And I have it set up where I can track who's actually going to that website to read that article. That's extremely powerful, having that information. But beyond email, I reach out to people on the phone, Neil. I reach out to them on LinkedIn, right? I might send them something in the mail, perhaps, if that's appropriate. So these are all the different nurture touch points that are extremely important. But even if that's all set up and you don't have a system to let you know who's raising their hand and who's showing interest, then it's really for naught. And so, a good visual I always use, Neil, when I kind of give this example, imagine a car dealership, okay? And you walk into a car dealership. You're walking in because you're interested in a car. Maybe not today, maybe in the next month, 2 months, but you're interested. You're not going because it's not, you have nothing better to do on a Saturday, right? There's a reason you're going in. Now imagine the whole room is filled with salespeople, but not one person comes up to you. You're getting in the car, you're looking at it, you're there for 20 minutes and nobody even comes up by to say hello. That's a poor lead nurturing strategy because they're not recognizing the signals that there's some level of interest, right? And so that's what happens when you don't have a CRM to give you those insights and those signals. You're missing this opportunity. And the worst part of all of this, Neil, is that that person you spoke to 3 months ago that you haven't nurtured is probably going to buy from your competitor because your competitor is in front of them at that right moment when they've decided to make a decision. And so I can't emphasize enough how powerful lead nurturing is. And we've seen it happen time and time again, even here at Cultivize and for our clients, where you have somebody coming through. Really quick, if I can give one last story. A client we brought on last May, they're a roofing business. They do about $10 million a year in revenue. And they do about 1,000 quotes a year with a team of 3 salespeople. So you can imagine it's really difficult to follow up with all the people that don't return a phone call, don't return a voicemail. And in the past, they would say, okay, well, we're going to make the assumption they hired somebody else and they decided not to go forward. really poor strategy. You and I both know that, right? Because they probably are going to make a decision. And so I convinced the owner, because they're a family run business, I said, let's create a series of emails that go out for the course of, I think we did 3 or 4 months, just to gently remind them, do you have any questions about the proposal we sent you? We're here to help you. Really short, sweet emails. Those emails contributed to over $800,000 in revenue for them at the end of last year. And we were able to tie back and show that somebody getting that email and engaging that email influenced them to reaching back out to my client.
Yeah, which is,
So it works.
I agree. It is a big change. And sorry to interject here, but I think,
No, that's it. That was the story. Sure.
yeah, so riffing on like sort of your point, there's a burn rate on leads, right? So where, for example, if you don't contact them, we're talking about leads going from when they first heard about you to going cold again. Like they won't even remember you. And especially in this day and age where essentially it's a competition of information and how much information we can get in front of that person. If another business, your competitor, is in front of that person a hell of a lot more, they are never going to remember you. Subconsciously, they'll probably be sleeping and they're like, "Oh, guess what? I've got a leaky roof right now," or something like that. "Oh, but there was this person that helped me and provided me with this information. Ah, wait, they gave me a guide on what are the things I need to sort of assess when I'm
Hmm.
trying to consider a roofing company." And guess what? A roofing company gave it. So therefore, I'm going to go to that person, or I'm going to think about them, at least find out or get a quote from them. That's, I think, a perfect way of sort of depicting how relevant you need to stay with and top of mind you need to stay through the use of lead nurturing with those prospects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And imagine if we back up for a minute before all happens, someone comes to the website and you've been there. I don't know if you own a home or Neil, but at any rate, you've called somebody to come help and do something, a service. How many times do you, when you call and somebody doesn't call you back? And so studies show that you really need to be calling back 15 minutes or less from the time you get a lead. And so if you're getting a lot of leads to your website and you're spending time and you're not getting back to them for hours or a day or 2 days later, they probably already went to a competitor.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary because you spent a lot of the resources trying to get in front of them in the first place. And then you also spent some additional resources to get them stored, right? If you did have your CRM. If you didn't have a CRM, it's even worse because you've got to spend some time to manage that lead. By that time, you probably could have even lost them already. So that timely update. I think that there is I wouldn't call it a stigma, Jason, but there is a focus of leads, right? So there's always like, oh, we need to get new leads. But conversion rate, right, it gets ignored most of the time, right? So you can generate way more leads, which is perfectly fine. But until you know that you've reached a ceiling on your conversion rate, what was the point of generating all the additional leads when you can't even handle that? And I think that's one of the issues these days. And I don't know if you find this as well, that there's a focus on generating the new lead rather than actually trying to make up the most out of the leads you already have just generated, maybe last week, let's say, right? And I think that's a pitfall too. But that's where CRMs can actually help you because you can set up the process like you're saying. I think it's is it have you read the book Breakthrough Advertising?
I
Eugene
have not.
Schwartz. It's a really good book, and Eugene Schwartz talks about like the five sort of stages of awareness, right? Going from unaware to like product aware at the end, and the whole idea is that how you can move that lead or prospect from being unaware to right when they are product aware and they're ready. They know they need to buy. They know how you're better than the competition. They know, for
Hmm.
example, all of that. But that's how you use lead nurturing, right? To get them from the stage of unawareness to where they're the most aware of how to fix their solution and who to actually select and who gives them the best bang for their buck, but also the best service. So yeah, just thought it'd be a good idea to sort of interject on that point that you made because it's crucial in ensuring you don't burn your leads because
Yeah.
there is a focus on new leads, new leads, new leads.
And I'll just add, we can move on to the next, question, but and to the topic, and there's a lot to unpack here.
Mm,
But it's also about the quality. We see a lot of times, especially when even though we're not doing any marketing for our clients in terms of inbound marketing, we actually see specifically on Facebook, not to knock it, but we all know that Facebook for many businesses is not a great source of lead quality. So it can
mm,
generate a lot of leads, but the quality isn't very high. And so we've seen a lot of businesses where the marketing team is like, hey, we're doing great. We're generating all these leads. But then if you have that data connected in your CRM to the sales team, you're like, yeah, you've given us 85 leads last month, but 80% of them were garbage. Like couldn't even get them on the phone, or they didn't have the money, or they didn't have the exact, problem we can help with. So to me, I would also just add to that, it's not always about volume. I'd rather have a lower volume of leads that are much more qualified and higher quality than the reverse.
I agree.
Businesses would find that as well.
Yeah. And it's actually one of the, we can talk about it now, right? So I think we can go into like strategic ways to actually combine lead nurture and the CRM. And we can talk about some of the ways that you've used it or you would recommend. But that piece on getting sales and marketing sort of integrated, the CRM helps that, right, become more of a powerful solution for your business and your marketing and sales approach, right? So that you can, as two teams, you can actually be in constant communication, have a referral loop that goes back from sales. Was this campaign any good? And some contacts were great or not. And then guess what? The close rate or the meeting booked rate or whatever it is might increase based off of the feedback they're providing you because you're focused on optimizing the right area using that CRM data in the first place. So, sorry, you going to say something, Jason?
No, I was gonna say that, despite whatever technology is being used, I mean, the CRM certainly is a big component, but it starts really with strategy and one exercise. And I know there's people maybe at the gym or in the car listening on audio or wherever they might be, but a really quick exercise is take a pen and paper and do two things. One, write down a list of all the ways people find out about your business. And that could be referral partners, it could be the specific marketing you're doing, right? The webinars, whatever it might be. That's really important to start figuring out, where the lead's even coming from. And then ideally, you'd want to track that. And we could talk more about that later. But the second thing that I think is even more critical, most businesses we talk to, I wouldn't say most, but a good amount, cannot write down on a piece of paper their exact sales process step by step. And without that, you really can't build any foundation of any technology on top of something that doesn't exist. And so when I say the process, I'm talking about as soon as a lead comes in, the phone rings, an email comes in, a web form gets filled out. What's the very first thing that happens? Not going to be an auto reply email. It might be someone picking up the phone. What's the second thing that happens? What's the third thing that happens? All the way to the individual steps to either winning that business or losing that business. And that's often where we see a lot of gaps in inconsistency within an organization, and also an opportunity. You talked before about automation, about removing a lot of the manual work, right? Some of your steps might be Mary has to go into the system and put this information here. Then step two is Sue has to take the information and put it in here, right? And then all of a sudden you start realizing, oh wow, we're spending a lot of time managing all this when it could be a lot more simplified.
Yeah, I think that there's something you mentioned earlier as well with having how that helps also with lead nurturing, not just on email, but on multiple platforms, right? If you had this centralized, then you can actually create audiences, segment those audiences so that you can create that same list for four different platforms just simply because they're connected. And you can say, I don't have to do all these exports and clean up before I put them into a new platform. It's automatically
Mm-hmm.
done. And guess what? You can nurture them on those platforms really easily without having to mess with any sheets or anything like that. So I think that's really important. And it stops you from actually losing leads, right? So you actually can ensure that you are strategically managing those leads opposed to just let's just try and reach out to these leads, right? And that's it. That's the be all and end all of the strategy. So I think we could talk about how it sort of helps. This sort of helps with leaks in our sales funnel, right? Because you're effectively managing those prospects, those prospective leads. So are there other ways of fixing it aside from just assigning lead nurture, right? Just nurturing the leads overall. How else have you guys sort of seen these businesses or B2B businesses specifically use some of this data and CRM as well?
Well, I mean, the biggest things are where we I should say the biggest gaps we look for are the inefficiencies of things they're doing. So, especially in B2B, some organizations are doing a lot of quotes and proposals, as I mentioned with that roofing company. So, creating reminders for following up on quotes is a huge lift in potential revenue. that we can generate pretty quick results for.
Yeah.
Another piece too, I think, is even something as simple as your monthly email newsletter. We've had lots of clients come back where, in fact, we just brought on a moving company who here also in the States, who I first spoke to over a year ago. They sort of disappeared. They were all very excited, wanted to move forward. And then it sort of just fizzled out. We put them on our newsletter list, hadn't spoken to the owner in many months. And then out of nowhere, he called me and I happened to look in the CRM and see that he had gotten a recent newsletter. He opened it and he looked at it. And so, would he have called me without that? Maybe, but probably not, right? Because he probably would have forgotten about me, maybe even my name, the company name. It had been like 8 months since we last spoke. And so, just being able to have that there as that almost like a billboard that's like, you're driving on the highway. There's a reason you see the same billboard every 10, 20 miles over and over. It's repetition, right? There's a purpose for that. It's a one-on-one marketing strategy. And so, that nurturing is really no different. But I think the other piece too is, connecting the marketing, the inbound marketing activities, I think is really important as well. That's often a huge thing that a lot of the companies we talk to and work with, Neil, don't have in place. And what I mean by that is they're not defining every single person that comes into their world, every lead, to say, how did you hear about us? Right. And it's not, and specific. It's not like, oh, on the web or from social, which social platform?
Mm.
Was it Google search? Was it a Bing search? Was it a paid ad? Which specific trade show, not just trade show? And when you have all that data and then you're connecting that to what the sales team is doing, you could very, very quickly and easily help the client, right? And the client can help themselves say, oh, wow, we're spending all this money on X. And yeah, we're getting a lot of leads, but the conversion is lousy, right? We need to either change our marketing strategy or just get rid of what we're doing. And so that's, I would say, is an extremely powerful and often a first priority for us. Especially a lot of our clients are spending, 50,000, 100,000 or more a year on marketing. It's a big investment. And it's the same way you wouldn't go to a financial consultant and say, here's $10,000 a month to invest me in the stock market into all these funds, and then never ask for a report to see, are you making money? Are you losing money?
Yeah.
Like no sane financial investor would do that and not care. But there's this sort of like gray area with marketing where companies are just like, oh, well, we have to do marketing. Like that's what we have to do. Every business does it. And we're going to carve out some arbitrary number and that's going to be our marketing budget. And they never are able to track to see if they're actually making a return on that investment or not. And to me, that's, especially with today's technology, that's like a super easy fix that a lot of businesses just don't really pay attention to because they don't know how to fix it.
I think that's how you turn your entire operation into like that profit center, right? As well.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that it's highly profitable because just simply because, just as you mentioned, if you've got to carve out or if you've got to cut out or kill the thing that you're doing that's generating the worst leads, right? And you're optimizing that and you don't have that visibility, you're going to burn way more money when you could have had the run, you could have had an earlier run rate if you'd just optimized early to having everything connected. And
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the number of times I've probably gone to a business and they've used UTM tracking fine because they heard that you can track things based on UTM, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
They've not configured fields for like tracking the different times that someone's interacted. If they want, depending on their attribution, and this is different beast altogether, like understanding where leads came from and what has the most impact. But just not having UTMs logged or even looking at the data in the right way, just having Google Analytics only to look at this sort of stuff, it's probably a closed loop, right? And it's almost a black box. So you can find out things from Google Analytics, but it's not enough because you need to connect everything up to your data. And I think now actually the most successful marketing teams or the most successful businesses with their marketing and sales operations are the ones that when they are coming up or constructing this strategy, CRM, nurturing, those two things are always part of that conversation because they all three of them work. Those two things are essentially fundamentals that you have within a strategy. How do we use this data? Why are we reaching out to these people? Is it because we
Mm-hmm.
had a signal in the past? These are the sort of insights we can get. And I think one of the things that a lot of people need to also understand is when you have that data, it's okay to set things up in the beginning, right? Sort of publish things to your whatever your process or operation is in how you're going to go after these leads, and then get some feedback and then optimize accordingly, right? We don't need to run 100 miles an hour straight away, because this data, it's a stepping, when you're using CRMs or you're using this data together to nurture leads, it's a stepping stone. You get feedback from every nurture that you have, and you understand exactly the impact each of those leads had on the pipeline, right? That you've generated over X amount of months, or even in a couple of days, right? If that's how short your sales cycle is. So, are there any nurturing strategies that you have ever deployed, right? That aside from just email, like the socials, that sort of thing
Hmm.
is, or I would actually, let me reframe that. Probably not even are there any other ways that you've actually done lead nurturing, but have you found any really crucial elements to lead nurturing, right? Aside from just the content aspect, right?
Yeah.
That is key.
So the answer is yes. And so what I found is just recently, in fact, and it's actually interesting timing, for the last maybe, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks, I've been testing out a new tool that uses, we talked all earlier about AI. So it uses AI to go into LinkedIn, and then it'll pull in, for example, like one of the things it has is like a safe search. So you click a button in this tool and says, here's all the people that you're connected to, like immediately, that have posted something in the last 24 hours. And then here's all the people that have also posted something that no one else has commented on their stuff yet. And so now you could go through extremely quickly, and they have a, I'll call it a plugin in LinkedIn, but you click on a comment. Everybody's familiar with LinkedIn, I would think, at this point. And instead of typing a comment, you click their little purple icon, and it already knows who you are, like your persona, either for you or your business, because you've created that. This is, my name is Jason Kramer. These are my interests. These are my, sort of like catchphrases. These are my personal interests, my business. This is my background. This is how I help people. All these things to build out a persona. And then you say, okay, I want the tone of my comment to be inspirational. I want it to be motivational. I want it to be, professional, conversational, all these different attributes you can put onto it. You click a button, and then Neil, amazingly, it within seconds looks at the entire post. Even if it's a short post and it's video content, it could scrub it all, and it comes back with a very thoughtful comment on it. But more importantly, it weaves in kind of what you do, right? So it's like, hey, Neil, this is like a really interesting article about UTM attribution. As a CRM consultant, we have seen attribution play a critical role in lead nurturing, right? So it's not really selling what I do, but it's showing my expertise as it relates to what they're commenting about. And
Mhm.
I can tell you that this is something I've always wanted to do to get really engaged, because the LinkedIn algorithm, we all know, is this like kind of crazy sort of mystery, right, to many people, even the experts, because it's changing all the time. But it takes a lot of time to be really productive and active on LinkedIn. And I'm not talking about just like sending out invites or doing like automated stuff to mass, email people. I'm talking about engaging with influencers and people that have strong followings or people that you want to do business with in a consistent, meaningful way. That is a huge, huge time suck to do that manually. I mean, you could spend 10 hours a week doing it, and no one really has that time. I could spend an hour with this tool and comment on like 100 people's posts, right, in an hour. And what I found, to answer your question, is people are now engaging with me back, right? They're sending me invites to connect. They're thanking me for that comment. They're asking me follow-up questions. And so that's another part of the nurturing, right? If I'm out there and I'm trying to create awareness for myself. And you talked earlier before we started about the personal brand, and I had the Yoda of CRM here by title,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to build my personal brand on LinkedIn. And the best way to do that is to comment and to engage with other people that are already active on LinkedIn. And so that's just one example, that I want to provide. There is one thing, if I can sort of just go back step though, about everything we've been talking about. For most people listening, what we're talking about probably sounds very complex and overwhelming. And that's understandable, right? Technology sometimes is overwhelming and complex. The thing that's important for everybody to know is that Cultivize as a company, we're just not selling software. we're building the strategy on how to use existing technology you may have, coupled with new technology we can recommend to help solve the problem. But then we roll up our sleeves and we do 99% of the work. So we're moving in your data, we're customizing the system, we're integrating it to your website forms, we're physically training your team over video calls, which will take, maybe a few hours for us to do, which is all included. And then we stay on board as a strategic coach and partner every single month or even weekly or biweekly as needed to look at those changes that are needed, right? You mentioned before, Neil, this isn't something where you just set it up and walk away and it's done. You do have to be, looking at it and reviewing what's working, what's not working, and make adjustments, just like most things in life and in business. And so I say that because, as complex as what you and I might be talking about to some people, the fear should go away knowing that the Cultivize team handles all of this, right? So all we need is just some like basic information from our clients to understand their business, their sales process, all these like high level pieces of information. And then we'll come back with a plan saying, this is what we recommend based on your specific needs and goals. And then once we have the sign off, we go build it. And we can build it usually in like 3 to 6 weeks. So it's not like this is like a 6 month, 1 year long project we're talking about. These are things we can get running relatively quickly for companies. So I just wanted to add that to the people listening so that, if there is a concern, to know that a company like Cultivize can help walk them through the process.
Yeah, and I think that there's going to be at the end, everyone. I'll be linking, some contact points for Jason Cultivize and his team as well, so that you guys can ask any questions that you might have, and
Of course.
and getting started straight away. I think it's important to note as well that Jason's mentioned that every business is different, right? The sales cycles vary depending on what product you're serving. For example, predominantly that when I work with software companies, their sales cycle is usually longer. But as you can imagine, if it's a B2B company in the services space, sales cycle might be long, but probably not as long, right? Could be half the amount. But every business is different and the buying behaviors are different. So you can adjust your strategy over time by learning, almost doing a test and learn, taking a test and learn approach after implementing something like this to understand how your audience is actually behaving. So I thought that that's important, but I also wanted to know whether, Jason, you are the Yoda of CRM. So what does what are your immediate thoughts on where we're going within this space with the future of CRM, lead nurturing technology? How are you expecting businesses to behave or even the technology itself?
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. I mean, we all know the power of kind of what AI has brought to the table already. I'm a big believer, and that's kind of like my marketing background, that I don't quite know that AI is going to be able to help create like the strategy and implement the strategy and kind of do all that work. In my opinion, you're still going to need kind of a human mind to come up with some clever ideas or at least rework the information that AI is spitting out. I use AI a lot. I mean, specifically ChatGPT and other tools for our business, and it really helps. It doesn't do the whole thing, but we talked earlier before about, when I'm on these podcasts, I take the transcript and I turn it into a very thoughtful article, on our website and on LinkedIn. I use AI to help with that, but it's not doing all of it on its own. It's just kind of a component. Like you say before, you have many tools to help with your business and with the podcast. So where I do see, though, and I'm excited about, I'm hoping that it's going to help synthesize data within the CRM. So some of the things you talked before about making, assessments about different things that are going on, your email reports, your email, engagement, your lead nurturing strategies, the conversion rates of leads and the quality of those leads, and all these different things. Most CRMs can pull together already today very comprehensive reports. So, not to say that it's not being done, but I think AI is going to elevate that to a much more significant level, in the next 5 years. Like, there's no doubt in my mind because it's capable of doing it today. It's just a lot of these tools you mentioned, HubSpot and there's other Salesforce, they're not leveraging AI to do this sort of machine computing of all the data and synthesizing the data. And I think that once that's out, that's going to be a huge game changer for the companies that have a lot of data, but that have consistent data. And I think that's why it's really important, more so now than ever, to start coming up with a procedural process where all the data that you're collecting about prospects, customers, past customers, et cetera, is all being done in a methodical, thoughtful, and consistent way, so that when this technology does come to market, you could actually leverage it. Because if you don't have the data, there's nothing going to be the process.
No,
It's basically, so yeah.
I agree. And I think it's an interesting point with AI because the way I see it as a marketer, and I don't think people should be threatened by AI in the sense, oh yes, if I do it like this, then maybe there would be no work left to do. Like that's not how it works. It's actually meant to speed up and make your processes more efficient, right? So, with HubSpot, for example, they introduced Breeze AI, which helps you actually create workflows within the tool itself. And not to get into what workflows are, but they're essentially just automations, right, on how to handle certain
Hmm.
data. So there are ways that AI could be leveraged to improve your process. And I do believe that the future will have where it can adopt an AI sense of technology to help you improve the speed at which you execute certain things, certain strategic elements, certain tactical elements within the use of your CRM, your lead nurturing tech stack, or even just your overall tech stack, right? So, and we know that there's thousands of tools, so this will be it will be a big thing in the future. But I don't know if I've missed anything out, Jason. I think that we've talked about a lot. We've definitely unpacked quite a bit. And I do think that we've understood CRMs and the key influence of lead nurturing within your marketing and sales pipelines, and how you can actually set that up as part of your infrastructure, especially if you're a smaller company, if you're a B2B startup offering services or
Hmm.
products. But it's powerful when you combine CRM with lead nurturing and also adopt it as part of your initial strategy and how you strategize how to go to market using these tools and using these approaches. So that's something that I think people can definitely take some great insights from, Jason. And it's been actually really insightful having you on as chatting here because it's just I feel like it's not talked about enough, CRMs, and the actual technology itself is not talked about enough. Whereas you've probably noticed that there's a plethora of content where you're just focused on how do I generate leads, or maybe use a LinkedIn ads or a Facebook ads or something like that, and more of the content's focused on that, but no one really focuses on the tech itself all the time, and especially something as core as CRM. So honestly, thank you for coming on and talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, and you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me. Technology doesn't solve any problems in business. It's the people that solve the problems. The technology is just the tools. And so, if you don't know how to build a house and you're given all the tools to build a house, you're never going to figure it. It's not going to be a very good house.
I agree.
And so, you're right. I mean, I think it's not talked about enough. And when it is talked about, it's more talked about the features and benefits of a tool rather than like the strategy. We'll say that, you know, people always ask us like, who are our competitors? Yes, we have them, but we're not a software company, right? So we're not just, software companies are just selling software. They're not going to help you with the strategy and to make sure that that software aligns with your goals and your business needs. They're going to be like, oh, you want to build landing pages? Your tool does that, but like, do you need landing pages? Maybe you don't need them. And so, I do appreciate it. I just want to mention, we talked a lot about lead nurturing. We just wrote 5 new ebooks just last month. One of them is called the Lead Nurturing Blueprint. It's a free download. If you go to afterthelead.com, that's afterthelead.com, you could download that as much as other guides we have as well for even optimizing your current CRM. We have a new guide for actually doing research on CRM. So it's not so much a comparison to platforms rather than here's the critical things you need to know when choosing a new CRM. And like you talked before about, when hiring a roofing company, what to look for, this guide will take you through to make sure when you're talking to other vendors, you're asking them the critical questions that are going to impact making a right decision. The other thing I also want to mention quickly, Neil, there's a tool we built that's been actually out since the beginning of January called Profit Path. You could find that after the lead. You could also go to profitpathtool.com. And Profit Path is a tool I built based on my knowledge of CRM, what makes a CRM powerful, but it's not a CRM. It's what it is a series of interconnected Google Sheets, which people are familiar with Google Sheets. And so we use the power of what Google's created, and we've built a way to track all of your contacts, your leads, your sales funnel, as well as all of your marketing channels, and help you answer all the things we spoke about today without the complexities of a full on CRM, nor the cost. So while we've made it extremely affordable for smaller businesses and startups at just $199 US for a lifetime access, I want to give a little offer to all of your audience here today. And so if you type in growth vertical, you'll get $50 off for that tool. So it'll be $149 for a tool that I can tell you has taken us several months to build, which is extremely powerful. And there's a demo of that there. They can see a video of it. So I thought that might be helpful for the people that aren't quite ready, Neil, for a full on CRM system, but want to benefit from the things we were talking about today.
Yeah, no, and I'll definitely be putting these links in the descriptions as well so that people can have quick access to this.
Great.
And of course, if you want to
Thank you.
reach out to the Cultivize team, you know where to see them, right, at cultivize.com. So that'll be added to the description as well. But I appreciate you coming on again, Jason. But if everyone did like the episode, please, wherever you're consuming this, just like and do comment if you want to see anything particular. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. We'll see you soon.
Take care.